What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. This is a rough one. A couple things I wanted to get into. Actually, to be honest with you, what I was going to do today was to give a shout out to this young man. This came across my Facebook stream, and the caption reads, this young man rode the bus to his own graduation, walked across the stage with no family support, nobody to hug him or congratulate him, rode the bus back home, the back of his gown wet due to sweat. He defied the odds. He was motivated to complete his task. Congratulations, Corey Patrick. Shout out to this young man. I don't know if he'll ever see this, but I want him to know that on behalf of Black men that have walked in this path before, we honor you. And I honor him also because of how many Black males I've seen who've done this same thing. Walk this road of completion on a task, rites of passage, if you will, to no fanfare, no support. Now, all due respect to my loved ones, there are several of these kinds of graduations that I've walked home alone, thrown the degree in the closet and kept grinding. Never said anything, but it hurt. Definitely, I can't lie. And this is not just graduations, achievements, the whole deal. I got tenure. I got a letter that said I had tenure. I bought a comic book, went home, made dinner for my son. It can be rough, but I salute you brothers that grind every day to no acknowledgement. Salute you. I didn't want to skip this, even though the subject matter I just ran across really just shifted me in a whole different direction. Now, you guys know I talk about abuse a lot. I talk about domestic abuse or intimate partner violence a lot. And I do so because Black men suffer from it. And for the most part, people don't care. Now, the data shows us, and thanks to Dr. Tommy J. Curry, the author of The Man Not, he was the one that really introduced to the public, particularly the Black public, that in the Black community, intimate partner violence is bidirectional, almost equal. They even have a Time.com article about it in terms of men and women. Bidirectional abuse, especially in the Black community. That means that males initiate violence and females initiate violence almost to equal degrees. Now, some of the other data out shows, and I've done previous shows on this last year, that women actually initiate violence to a higher degree than men. They tend to use weapons more often than men, and not just in self-defense, often when initiating violence. But many of us are still told that we're lying. We're making it up. So this ran across my Facebook screen. This is a young man. Just went through his own violent altercation. And I'm going to read to you what he wrote about it. This is Mr. Elliott. And Mr. Elliott has been through his own personal hell, right? Show you a few more pictures before I read the caption. You can see the stitches he got, the staples, right? Blood all over his face and neck. Back of the neck. Yeah. Got all kind of people on my page blowing up over this, right? So she even scratched up the U-Haul truck, front door, face.
Lightly asking her to leave my apartment.
That's fine.
She has her weapon out.
I do have my weapon.
Get out.
Why? Because
Please,
it's in my back, and
please,
I'm gonna put it back.
please get out.
Where I had it before
Please
you
get
started
out.
grabbing me.
Please get out.
I'm not doing
I'm
shit.
asking you nicely to get out of my apartment.
That's
Please.
fine.
Please get out of my apartment.
That's fine.
Please get out of my
Like I
apartment.
said,
No,
like
sit
I
down.
said,
Come on.
don't touch me.
Get out of my apartment,
Stop
please.
fucking touching me. So you see him? You see him?
I ain't even.
Nah, you see what the fuck you're doing?
Get out
yeah,
my
that shit on
apartment.
camera.
Get out of my
Yeah,
apartment.
Get that shit on camera.
Get out of my apartment.
Move.
Come on.
Move, you
Let's
dumbass
go.
nigga.
Let's go. Just leave.
I'm not doing shit.
Just
I'm
leave.
not doing shit. Get the fuck on.
Wait, get out of my apartment.
Get the fuck on. Cause I'm
Let's go.
ready. Get the fuck on. Get on
Just
my face.
leave.
Get on my face.
Just leave. Why
I'm
you
not
still
doing
here?
shit. Who are you? Because I'm speaking.
I'm not. I don't want to talk.
I don't care. It's
You have a
not about
gun.
what
I
you
want you to
do.
get the fuck out.
I'm getting it out of my bag because you keep trying to grab it.
We're gonna put it in your car.
The fuck? I'm not going downstairs yet.
No.
Until I get out what the fuck I want to get out.
I don't want you to get out. What
It
you
don't
got
matter.
there?
It don't matter.
Leave.
It don't matter.
If that bitch accidentally go
It
off, we're
don't
gonna have
matter.
problems.
And that's not my problem. So get the fuck out of my face and stop touching me, nigga.
Bree, leave.
Get out of my face.
Leave.
Get out of my face. Thank you. Get the fuck out of my
Ignorant
face.
ass bitch.
Get the fuck out of my face.
Now, these clips here didn't have any sound, but you can see her brandishing the gun. Now, mind you, and shout out to my boy, Mr. Malone, who's sending me clips of the comments people are responding to. You got women writing in saying things like, sounds like a narcissist met his match, right? Another woman wrote in, shaking my head, should have called the police on her or knocked her, dumbass out. He's just as toxic as she is, right? These are the kind of things that people are saying, right? Let me see. Another woman commented, y'all should read her side through her friend, where he admitted he cheated on her multiple times and caused her to miscarry the child from cheating. But now ask yourself a question. If a man sliced up, cut up, stabbed, and attacked his girl and was brandishing a gun while yelling at her in her face because she cheated on him, would it be acceptable? No, not really. There really is no excuse. But it's funny how people actually think infidelity is a justification for intimate partner violence or homicide. I can't tell you how often, both in class as well as in the public, playing these kind of videos, talking about these kind of issues in terms of intimate partner violence that Black men experience, and how many people actually justify it with he cheated, as if that's some kind of justification. This is ridiculous. So this is the kind of thing we're looking at. And brothers, all I can tell you is, yes, call the police. For real. Straight up. Do what you have to do to survive the encounter. See, the thing is, in the last few decades, because intimate partner violence has become such a political issue, and their policies, and carceral feminism has had a lot to do with this in terms of actually, creating policy to make sure that abusers are incarcerated. Part of the problem is, even though the language of the law is neutral as far as gender, the practice of it is overwhelmingly conceptualized the way feminists presented it, as women as victims, men as aggressors, right? This is rooted in the Duluth model. The Duluth model, for the most part, was something we saw taught not only across the board, mainstream culture, across the board in the academy, but especially in psychology as it relates to therapy and counseling, and of course, in terms of how the law interprets abuse. Right? The Duluth model basically made the argument that all violence in a relationship stems from patriarchy, i.e., men. And so even if a man is a victim, he's still responsible, and it's still something he likely did. So if a woman attacks a man, it's likely because he initiated it. This is the way the Duluth model has framed how we interpret intimate partner violence. And when you add to that scores of films since the 1970s that primarily depict abusers as male and victims as female, we only have one framework to use for interpreting this. You have scholars that will get up and argue that the male experience with abuse is so minute it's not worth talking to. And if anything, it's just a deflective ploy to get out of men out of having to reflect on the violence they cause. And when you actually show the data that actually proves that women are as violent as men and often initiate violence first, it's met with all kinds of excuses and deflection. Well, it was in self-defense. How is it in self-defense when you haven't even heard the case? How is it in self-defense where we're talking about scores of people over multiple continents, and we haven't even delved into the data, but you can interpret for a whole plethora of accounts that it must be in self-defense? These are the kind of deflective tactics used so that men and boys are not allowed to actually call their situations into question. They're not actually allowed to push their experiences and have them generally received in the public. See, this man is not on CNN. He's on Facebook. And why? But I'll read the caption because I want y'all to see it, or at least hear it, right? So the caption reads, "For about 2 years, I've been dealing with a very hurt and unstable woman. I met her during the time of her mom dying. I automatically wanted to be someone to help her through the darkest time of her life. I got emotionally attracted to loving and caring for her, but I forgot to care about myself. I had so many signs that she was crazy and I needed to walk away, but the love I had for her was so strong, I didn't want to fail her." Now let me hold up right here. This is a mistake that many men make, particularly, in this era, in this gynocentric era, in this era where young men are raised by the gynarchy, by the Black Gynarchy. In other words, majority of us are raised by single mothers. Primarily, the framework that we use here is that we want to be of service to her. We want to heal her. We want to help her. Well, these are the narratives we're taught since we were little. Prioritize her. Have you ever thought about how she feels? Think about what she needs. I was the generation, mine was the generation that heard this, really the strongest, the first, Generation X. We got this in the 80s and in the 90s. Prioritize her feelings. If she's hurt, you need to be a gentleman and kill yourself to make her happy. But the reality of it is you can't make anybody happy. You can't. You really can't fix anybody. They have to fix themselves. The most you can do is inspire someone by example to fix themselves, and you can be there for them. But at the end of the day, people's issues, especially on this level, you can't fix. Urge them to go to counseling. And I will say this as well, fellas, do not engage sexual relationships with people like this. Avoid it. I'm serious. It can cost you your life. It really can. Avoid it. These people need help, and you do not need to be standing in for a trained counselor trying to do this. But these are the narratives we were sold in films and movies and a million different love songs. I ran across one of my old tapes the other night. I used to play whenever I had a woman over. And I actually listened to the words in a lot of the songs I used to play. I think Attorney Dennis Sperling, the last time I was on this show, he used the term, I think he was joking, but he wasn't, where he said, he said, "I'm a recovering simp." And I agreed. I am too. Part of the reason for that is many of us were raised to be, not only in families, but also in terms of media. This is what we're talking about. And this is the blowback from being a simp, a recovering simp, as it were. And by that, I simply mean as a man who was raised to prioritize women and girls' feelings and worldviews over their own, even to their own detriment, their own health, or their own lives. We were taught that we had to be gentlemen who rode in on a white horse and saved a woman or a girl or a single mother and her kids or whatever it was from whatever she was going through, even at the risk of losing our lives. This is what we were taught good men did, especially in the nationalist community. That was a whole nother element to it too. If you were politically active, being a nationalist also meant that not only did you prioritize family, which, on the surface doesn't sound bad about that at all, but what was added to that is to be a good man was to play this role. Women were, for the most part, void of accountability in this. But anyway, I continue with what he says. He said, "I didn't want to fail her. I'm not the perfect man, but I don't deserve to lose my life for any of this. Her anger was uncontrollable. We had many fights and altercations to where it became violent. I wasn't raised in a household that I seen my parents fight all the time. This was a complete shock to me. I done everything in my power to give the young lady love and things that she needed while dealing with her unstable mental. I understand that she was dealing with a lot. I couldn't tell her how to feel about her mom dying. Also, I know she lived a rough life. A broken woman is a dangerous thing to be with. It's almost cost me my life. God was there with me through it all. Justice is being served, and I'm not sure how I should feel about it. I just don't want this to happen to someone else. I'm trying to force myself to understand that I shouldn't just care about her, but my life matters too. I'm just speaking from experience that if you're in anything toxic and abusive, leave the first time, right? Don't wait, because you might not be able to walk away the second time. Keep me in your prayers as I recover." Now, there's something in here that he said I wanted to kind of focus on. He said, "Justice is being served, and I'm not sure how to feel about it." Now, this is also a feature of Attorney Sperling's Recovering Simp, right? The idea that even though your life was clearly in question in terms of what could have happened to you, you're still prioritizing how she feels and feeling guilty about the fact that she's in jail. Now, I'll say this, especially to those who wrote in the comment section where they were dissing him and they were talking about what he should have done. And then, of course, talking about, you know, some of the women who wrote in saying, well, he cheated on her and he deserved this and blah, blah, blah. Listen, did she show up in the hospital like this? All indications suggest not, but hey, you never know. And that's one of the things about social media. I fully accept that this could be some type of misrepresentation. Hell, there's even instances where this is a performance. I don't personally think this one is, but hey, I've been surprised before. So I'll say this. What I'm talking about today is not really about this situation. It's about what Black men experience in regard to intimate partner violence and potentially intimate partner homicide. I want people to be familiar. This narrative that Black men are monsters and abusers is a fabrication. I want Black men to understand it. I want everybody else to understand it. And more than that, I want Black males, since there is no general discourse on what we need to do and how we need to treat these situations, I want to tell you, walk away. It is not worth your life. Now look, you know, I have zero tolerance for disrespect. So that's me. And that took a long time to get to. It took a long time to get to. It probably way longer than it should have. It probably took decades longer than it should have because of the way many of us were raised. And I'm not talking about our parents. I'm talking about in the culture, in mainstream culture, and in the household, right? But overall, it took too long, and at least my son can benefit from me telling him from the get-gate, zero tolerance for disrespect. She calls you out your name. She pops off on you, verbally. You can measure the situation, but me, I walk. Long before it gets here. But I understand why this isn't easy to walk away from. Now, from any functional context, it would seem to be. But again, when you're raised in a culture where you're told that you need to accept her dysfunction, help heal her, right, and prioritize her, even at your own expense, there's already a problem. We haven't even gotten to what exactly could take place in his life to make him feel like he needed to do this at the risk of his own life. Right? There's all kinds of dysfunction there to be explored, but here's the line. The line of difference between the two in these videos and in these images is unless he did this to her, he needs to be able to walk away. And she does need to be in jail. Straight up. Too many men go through this. And many of us don't know how to talk about it because we haven't had a vocabulary. We haven't been presented with the data. Many of us do not even know how to interpret the situation. And that means that people he goes to will be the first to tell him he's weak. He should have done this. He should have just knocked her out. All these kind of deflective tactics. But until you've been in a room with a crazy woman. But here's the other thing. Again, much of what I talk about in terms of anti-Black misandry is not just about the feelings that it evokes. I talk about it from a policy standpoint. What are the policies that created the behavior, that created the entitlement in her? What are the policies that created a hesitance in him to respond, even to defend himself? Well, simply put, we understand that when it comes to domestic violence, at least since the late 1960s and early 70s, men learned they would pay a heavy price if they were even so much as associated with it. So when you fast forward a couple generations, what most men have learned to do is to avoid having to put hands on a woman altogether. And that sounds great. We leave it at that. But even in situations of self-defense, men often won't. But here's the interesting thing too. They're in his apartment and she won't leave. He doesn't want to call the police. I would wager, what I know about the situation, he didn't, at least up to a point. But at the end of the day, most men don't want to. Part of the reason we don't want to is the way we've been socialized. Again, when you're socialized in a gynarchy, even if she's wrong, you're wrong. Fellas, be careful. Avoid this. It is not your job to heal someone. This love her through it bullshit. No. If you want to help somebody, do so as a platonic entity. If she has problems like this, urge counseling and stay at a distance. Do not become involved. And if you find yourself involved, because that's another angle, you don't often see it right away, but as soon as you start to see the red flags, especially the more you study so you can identify what the red flags are, begin to step back early, more often than not. We as men, we black men in particular, we do need to learn how to vet better. I'm not going to suggest that he should know all of this is possible within the first conversation, but we do have to do a better job learning the signs, the flags. We got to do a better job learning to walk away, and we do have to do a better job in learning who not to be intimate with too early. But I don't blame him for this. What I would suggest is that he seek help, straight up, not only for the trauma of what took place, but also what in his childhood may have led him to believe that he was supposed to endure this. And that goes not only to the purposeful socialization of men as conky serfs, as I call them, concubine serfs. We're trained to serve in the gynocracy. We provide sex, we provide emotional support, love, we provide all that. Men do emotional work they're not credited for. And what do I mean by emotional work? Being the emotional tampon for her. That's what we're trained to do, but we don't get any credit for that. But at the end of the day, when you threaten to remove that, this can be one of those responses. Anyway, point I'm getting at, fellas, learn the signs, get the help, do not jump in too quickly, and be clear on the data as far as intimate partner violence. It's real. And even in self-defense, you can find yourself being the one to go to jail, which is what prompts the hesitance in men to respond. So that being said, as I did with the show with, I think it was brother Carter Smith, Parnell Smith, I believe it was. Yeah, call the police. Document. And if everything has to go to court, ready to stand on what you did. All right, y'all. Peace.